Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have a couple of games to discuss. We're going to talk about Alabama's loss to Auburn. For any of the Auburn fans that want to throw stuff in the comments, feel free. I'm not going to acknowledge if you just, say nonsense, but if you have like a realistic, thoughtful comment, feel free to throw it down there. I'm happy to discuss with reasonable basketball fans. But, I will talk about that game, what my thoughts were, what went wrong for Alabama. I do think that the game plan was solid. I think that there's some things that I would have liked to have seen changed, but I think that overall the game plan was okay. And, what ended up being the difference in this game. Then we will discuss the next game that's going to be happening on Wednesday against Missouri in Columbia. We'll talk about that game, and then we'll get out of here. So as I mentioned, first things first, we're going to talk about this Auburn game. Alabama does drop this game by a score of 94-85. I was in attendance for this game. I was at College Game Day that morning. Once again, I think that the university and everyone put up together a very good show. I thought the College Game Day was solid. A really, really good turnout from the students, both at College Game Day and the game. The student section was as full as I've ever seen it, as fast as I've ever seen it. By the time that the general fans were able to get in, about 30 minutes after the students were able to, the student section was already 100% full all the way up to the corner. So just very impressed by what I saw out of that. I thought overall the crowd was a very solid environment. I'm just going to address this up at the top of the show. It's the only time I'm going to talk about it. Yes, something was thrown from the student section. I think it was just a drunk student. They probably spent that all night. They were immediately ejected from the game. Y'all may have seen Nate Oates make a comment about it. I do not make that as an indication on the fan base as a whole, but as Nate Oates, kind of mentioned in the press conference, when you have 13,500 people, somebody may be an idiot, and that's ended up being what happened. Anyone that was involved got immediately ejected. Cops and bouncers immediately got them out of the stadium. And you don't want to see something like that happen. Very thankful that nobody got hurt, but unfortunately, when you have that many people in a confined space, and there's alcohol involved, stupid things may happen. So, not the end of the world, but, we live and we learn, we move on. But when we get to the actual game, right? So let's get to the actual game. Auburn does win this game. I thought that in general, Auburn, executed their game plan very successfully. They did what Auburn does, right? When I did the podcast talking about this game, I pointed out a few key KenPom stats. And I know a lot of people don't always love me just breaking down the stats and looking at it from an analytics standpoint. But when you look at Auburn and what Auburn does as a team, they do two things incredibly well, better than just about anyone in the country. And that is they limit your ability to take three-point shots. And they're incredibly, incredibly good at limiting assists, right? Which just means that Alabama was going to have to play at the top of their game to get both of those. It also means that since Auburn is fourth in the country at limiting assists, when you get an open shot, you have to make the shot, right? Some of this game, and we'll talk about the shot quality stuff here in a bit. I actually tweeted something out during this game, and then they kind of mentioned me in one of their tweets. So I will show some of their stuff that they put out, at halftime and then at the end of this game. But it really turned out that some of the shots we were taking were not bad shots. Right, they were the shots that historically Alabama would be making. Mark Sears goes 2 of 11 from 3. Were they all 11 great shots? No, but even, and we'll talk about specific spots. But at the very end of the first half, Alabama's down 9. We draw up a set to end the half, and it's a set that we've ran multiple times with a double screen. Mark comes around the double screen to the top of the key. Puts up a 3. It's a shot that we used to run for Jaden Shackelford, for example, like the end of the Houston game. Seen this shot many times, and Mark just missed it, right? The shot was open. I'm not saying he was like wide open, but it was as open as it typically is on that specific action. And the shot just didn't go in, right? Sometimes that's going to happen, right? You're going to have the open shot. You're going to have the right guy taking that shot, and it's just not going to go in. And unfortunately, that was some of the case in this game. Now, credit to Auburn, they hit their shots when they were in the same situation, right? Like Alabama cuts it 68-68, and Tahad Pettiford heads a pull up. Alabama gives him a little bit of space. He hits a pull-up in transition to hit a three to cut it to 71-68, and then Alabama never ties the game really again, right? So it was a situation where Auburn hit their shots when Alabama wasn't, but I don't want any Alabama fan to think, oh, Alabama just, all they did was just go get blocked or go do this or go do that. I think that the game plan actually was not terrible, right? Alabama only gave up 7 turnovers. If you tell me coming into this game we're only going to have 7 turnovers, I probably take it, right? We out-rebounded them by 9. Both Cliff and Grant had 12 rebounds. Super happy about that. We double them up on offensive rebounds, right? Really happy with all those stats. The 2 stats that kill us in this game is Alabama was under 50% from layups and from around the rim. We've talked about how good Alabama has been this season. I think as of right now, let's see, Alabama currently still sits at 3rd in the country in 2-point percentage at 60.3%. So this game puts us, over 10% under our season average. And then Alabama shot, and I will give you the exact stat, Alabama shoots 19.2% from 3, which for a season, even if you don't include our SEC numbers, which have been much better since Chris Youngblood is entered the fold, but our full season numbers on that are 33.9, and Alabama shoots 19.2. Those 2 numbers are just not good enough to win a game of this magnitude, to win a game against a team as good as Auburn. Now, are those stats good enough to beat some other teams in the SEC? Sure. Right? I don't think Alabama played particularly bad defense. I thought that there were moments in which Alabama didn't play the best defense, but I thought that at moments Alabama was just playing the analytics. They were playing what they expected to happen, right? Janai Broome takes 2 threes early, and it really felt like Alabama obviously was defending him, but was not too worried if he took the shots because they knew Janai Broome's a 28% three-point shooter. He took 2 more threes later on in the game and broke both of them, right? They really weren't even all that close. So it was a situation, and I tweeted this out, and this is why the shot quality people quoted me, was Alabama. I said, Alabama needs to not lose their cool. Auburn's shooting really hot right now. We just got to sit down, defend, and play our game, right? Everyone was talking about, oh my gosh, Auburn hit this 3. This guy hit this 3. And when you look at the shots that were made early in this game, the only 3 that was made that was a truly terrible 3, right? We can't give that 3 up, was the 3 that Miles Kelly made, right? He's one of their best 3-point shooters. You can't give him an open 3. You got to be on him. You got to be there at the catch. That has to be a super contested shot. The contest was late, so you can't be that on that good of a 3-point shooter. I was not as concerned about the 3-point defense on Janai Broome. I was not as concerned about the 3-point defense on Chaney Johnson. Both of those guys shot better than what their average is. And, you have to do that if you're going to beat a team like Alabama. So credit to them, right? But I do think that there was a situation where Nate was playing a little bit of the averages. It worked against Chris Moore. Chris Moore puts up 3 shots. We don't defend him on any of the 3. He goes 0 of 3. Right? Alabama was using the Elliot Kudo and Seth Trimble strategy that he used in the Sweet 16 last season, right? They were hitting some shots at one point in that first half. Second half, they don't hit anything. And Alabama, does the strategy of I'm not even going to defend them, right? So this is, when you look at how Nate Oates defends some of these players, especially a team that has some really elite guys and especially an elite interior presence like Janai Broome, at times he's using his players and playing the analytics of, I don't want these other guys to get off shots, but if this guy does, it's okay, right? I'm going to play the numbers. And the numbers did not work early in this game. And the problem was the Auburn numbers were going in their favor and the Alabama numbers were going in not our favor, right? Alabama goes 2 of 15 from 3 in the first half, and they were not really bad shots. So we'll bring up the shot quality stats, and I'll show those here, the first and second half stats. So first half at halftime, the score was 42-33. The shot quality guys had this as a 47-46 game, right? So Auburn slightly underperforming what the shots said they should be. Alabama drastically underperforming by about 14 points. A fairly close game, but obviously Alabama just not making the shots where Auburn was. Then when you look at the full game, and I'll pop it up here on the screen as well, the full game, Auburn goes 94 points. Alabama gets 85 points. Shot quality looks at Auburn at 90. Should have been 90, so Auburn overperforms by 4 points. Alabama should be at 106 given the same shots. Alabama underperforms by about 21 points. When you look at a player-by-player breakdown and see what they think each player kind of should have been at, the big difference is if you see on Auburn's side, they have 3 guys that all overperformed. Denver Jones, Chad Baker-Mazara, and Chaney Johnson. All of them overperformed, within the realm of what they could have done. And then when you look at Alabama's guys, we have 3 guys that were, cold by comparison stake. Mark Sears, incredibly cold. Grant Nelson, underperforms, and Mo Diabate underperforms. And again, this is not a what they think going into the game or the number of shots someone takes, right? This is a how good were the shots you actually took, right? So when you dig into the box score, for example, Mohamed Diabate goes 4 of 9 from 2. There have been multiple games this season he goes 7 of 9, right? The shots around the rim are something that he's been very, very good at, and some of those just weren't falling. Now, some of that has to be good defense on Auburn's part, absolutely. But some of those are, he missed a shot that he typically makes. He doesn't get the bounce he normally gets, whatever the case may be, right? I know he also had his thumb taped up, which may have contributed to one of the free throws being an issue. But either way, this is a situation where, he just missed some shots he doesn't always miss. Grant Nelson goes 5 of 10. Mark Sears goes 2 of 6. Again, these are guys that typically, over the season have shot much better at the rim than these numbers indicate. And that's something that you can't have in this kind of game against a team like Auburn, right? When those stats all come together all at one time and Auburn shoots near around their average, right? 40%, when you look at how good of the three-point shooters Auburn is, 40% is not outside of the realm of crazy. They've got 4 guys at around 40% from 3. I fully expected that to be a possibility. But if Alabama shoots at 35%, 34%, around our average, this is a very close game. If Alabama gets close to our average from 2, this is, again, a very close game. This is a game that really was just a matter of Auburn played to what they were capable of, and Alabama just didn't. Now, you then go to ask the question, was it a situation of the guys were too hyped up with game day? I don't know, maybe. Was it a situation where, Alabama has played better on the road this season than they have at home? I think that had part to do with it. I don't exactly know why, because with game day, you would have expected, in my mind, the reason the on the road versus at home matters so much is you feel like everyone's against you versus when you're at home, everybody's behind you. So I felt like maybe that's an issue. But when Auburn stays the number 1 ranked team, I thought maybe Alabama has a chip on their shoulder. So I didn't think that was going to be an issue. Maybe it was, right? I don't know the answer to that question. But no matter what the case, as Nato said in his press conference, the season is still fully ahead of you. No matter what, you still have a chance to have a tie of the SEC championship. If you're to win out, you guarantee yourself a tie. Even if Auburn wins up until our game next. So your season is still fully ahead of you. You still have 6 more ranked teams, so you have to turn around and move on and play to your potential. There are some things you can draw from this game that were positive, right? And so I don't want to be all negative about, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. I think there are a handful of things that you can draw from this game that were very positive. So let's talk about some of those really quick, and then we'll move on. First things first, you did get Darion Reed back. It was not the Darion Reed that we had prior to going into this, and I didn't expect it would be. You only had him for 4 minutes, but you got to see Darion Reed actually play some game minutes and be okay to play. So that's all obviously good. As you continue down this stretch, the more and more you're able to play him and the better you have him ready for SEC tournament play and March Madness, the better you're going to be, right? That just gives you another option. That gives you more and more capabilities. Another guy that I think played a really good game, and some of the defense left some to be desired, but I do think that you have to give some credit to Janai Broome, was Cliff. Big Cliff was incredible on the glass. He ends up with 12 rebounds, 3 offensive. And I thought that he was an absolute animal on the glass. He was going up with both hands. He was really strong coming down with rebounds. I turned to some of the people I was sitting next to him, and when we were going on the run, and even before the run, I had said, "Hey, we need to have Cliff, since we weren't making shots. We need to have both Cliff and Mo D out there at the same time." I understand part of the reason why we like to have Mo D instead of Cliff is because you can run a little bit more on offense when you have Mo D. But I thought that when you weren't making shots, you at least had 2 guys that were able to rebound. You had a little bit better defense out there. If switches needed to happen, you could do it. It just gave you a little bit more toughness also. And so, to me, it was no surprise that some of the guys that were on the floor during that run were Mo D and Cliff, as well as like Chris Youngblood, right? You had some extra toughness and some physicality on the floor all at one time. And I thought that was a big impact on partially, how Alabama was able to get the run to tie this game. Another guy that I thought played fairly well, definitely not his best game ever, but played pretty well, is LeBaron Philon. I thought, honestly, he probably should have played a little more. He was able to get to the rim more than other guys were. He had that burst to actually just take it to the basket. He still did not finish perfectly around the rim, missed his 3 he took. There were some things as well that I thought that he kind of, was hesitating, more than you would ideally want. But you could say the same thing about Mark Sears, right? I do think LeBaron just had a little bit better burst and a little bit more, finishing around the rim, and handled some of the physicality Auburn was throwing at you, that some of which was being called, some of which wasn't. But I thought Philon handled it a little better than like Mark Sears or Aiden Holloway. I don't think either of those other 2 guys played terribly, but obviously when you lose a game like this, nobody's going to have just an absolute monster game. So those are some of the guys that I thought played really well. I thought that Mo D also played okay. I did have a little bit. I thought that his defense and his rebounding was very good. You see a lot of that out of Mo. He had a couple of blocks. I do think that from a Mo perspective, the one thing that you didn't love to see, the free throws, like I said, I do think something was going on with his thumb. The first one was a fine free throw. He just put a little bit extra on it. When he went to take some off, it was almost like his thumb was hurt. Like I said, I know it was wrapped up and had tape on it that I don't typically see on Mo, so I'm not sure if something happened during practice or whatever. But he took too much off of it, completely airballed the free throw. You're not typically seeing that out of Mo. I know he's not our best free throw shooter, but he is a pretty good free throw shooter. But again, that 4 of 9 from the free throw, or from the inside the arc, that's the problem. Usually around the rim, Mo's a little bit better at finishing than that. And just for whatever reason, it didn't happen today, right? Or didn't happen on Saturday. So that is a problem when you're looking at it. That's something you're going to want to see us clean up. But I do think that it was not a situation where Alabama just had the worst game plan ever, and Alabama, was running their head into a wall. There were a couple of moments where it felt like Alabama was driving to the rim, hoping to get a foul call. Because we have a lot this season, and some of which, were coming towards me, and I thought they were foul calls. They didn't get called, right? In a big game like this, there were moments in this game where the refs swallowed their whistle, and then there were stretches where they immediately blew the whistle on things that I didn't even think were calls. So I do think that the officiating was a little odd in this game, but I don't think it was the difference. The difference is you just didn't hit your shots, right? You had the shots to hit, right? It wasn't even a situation that you didn't get the shots off. I know if you're to ask Nate Oates, in his opinion, you didn't get enough shots off because the game plan was to be able to take a few more, and Auburn took more than you did, and to limit some of Auburn's, and Auburn gets 30 off, Alabama only gets 26 off. But I'm going to credit that to Auburn's defense as much as I'm not going to discredit Alabama's defense. I thought that overall the game plan was okay. Again, if you just hit 3-4 more threes, which puts you near your season average. Now, if you go 8 of 26 from 3 and hit, 1 or 2 more rim twos, like this is a tie game, right? Alabama had the shots capable and they just didn't fall, right? It's going to happen some games. Some games you have a Texas game where you shoot well above your season average and looked like absolute dynamite. And sometimes you have a game like this and shots just aren't falling. Credit to Alabama to even have this be a, single-digit game down late, there for a moment. Janai Broome misses like 4 straight free throws, and it looked like Alabama was going to have like some amount of tiny life at the very end. But either way, the fact that you got it as close as you did, shooting as poorly as you did, credit to them, right? You're going to have another crack at Auburn. Honestly, because of how Alabama has played on the road this season, you'll learn a lot in this Missouri game as well as in this upcoming Tennessee game. But if Alabama can play, well at Missouri and then potentially go into Tennessee and win that game, it would not shock me if Alabama plays better in Auburn Arena than they did in Tuscaloosa. I don't know why, but this team, for whatever reason, has done a little bit better on the road. And sometimes that happens. So that's what I have to say about that game. Like I said, there's a lot to unpack. I don't want to go be all doom and gloom, but I do think that there's some things you can take away positively and negatively from this game. We lost, you move on, you go to the next. The bracket experts don't have Alabama moving a single spot. Alabama's still the number 2 overall seed. Still a number 1 seed. It happens, right? When you play a top team, sometimes you lose, and that just happens. So I'm not going to cry too much about this one. Does it hurt? Does it sting? Sure. But you move on, you survive, and you go to the next. It's not like your season's over. So you learn things from this game, and we'll go to the next one. So the next game on the schedule is in Columbia against Missouri. And this is a team that has been up and down this season. They've been very good, right? Some of their only losses are to some of the better teams in the conference, with the exception of they have kind of more of a head-scratching loss against Texas. It was on the road against Texas. I had said in that Texas preview, if anybody watches all these podcasts, I mentioned how I was a little concerned about that Alabama-Texas game just because of how well Texas had played at home. Missouri was one of those examples that I used. They got beat by Texas, in Austin. Obviously, Alabama wins that game and plays incredibly well. But, Missouri is a team that, their only losses this season were to Memphis, Illinois, Auburn, Texas, Tennessee, and A&M. None of those bad losses by any stretch of the imagination. When Texas is your worst loss on the road, you're a very good team. But also remember that this team has beaten Kansas and has beaten Florida and Mississippi State. And the Florida and Mississippi State games were both on the road. And that Florida game, they had a fairly large lead. Florida's able to kind of storm back and cut it to a single-point game. Mississippi State, they won by 27 in Starkville. Right? So this is a team that has a capability of, playing a very, very good game and beating a very good team. So Alabama will have to play some of their best basketball if they plan to beat Missouri. When you look at the numbers, Missouri does a couple of things very, very well. And the thing that jumps off the page at you is they are second in the country at drawing free throws. They get to the free throw line a ton of times a game. So Alabama will have to play and defend without fouling. Thankfully, Alabama, has Darion Reed back, which we talked about in the Auburn breakdown. But it is a situation where we're back to 10-guy strength. And so we have some fouls, right? If we have somebody get in foul trouble, thankfully, we are 10 deep. This is a situation where because we have 10 guys who are capable of playing, and not just capable of playing at a high level, this is a situation where Alabama is very deep if it gets into foul trouble. So I am okay from that standpoint. But it is something you're gonna want to watch in this game. Do Alabama have, some of the big guys potentially get fouls? Is somebody how are the refs calling this game? That is something you have to watch when you're playing against a team that draws as many free throws as Missouri does. And again, they're second in the country at it. They are incredibly good at it. The other thing that Missouri does really, really well, and it's something that I think will partially determine how Alabama is doing overall, right? No matter how Alabama wins or loses this game, right? If you can see how Alabama, do they turn over the basketball, right? The thing that you could say super positively out of the Auburn game for Alabama was that Alabama turned the ball over 7 times, right? Alabama had been winning some games with a lot of turnovers, but thankfully in that Auburn game, they only turned the ball over 7 times. Mizzou is 5th in the country in steals. They are currently, above even what Ole Miss was. They're above Vanderbilt, above Mississippi State, above McNeese, right? Some of these teams which Alabama has played, some of which were able to turn over Alabama quite a lot, right? That Ole Miss game, we talked about how Ole Miss was able to, get a lot of live ball steals, and it was a huge reason as to why Alabama played so poorly is Ole Miss jumped in a lot of passing lanes, and Alabama was just lazy with the basketball, and Ole Miss made us pay, right? The offense also did not play well, but part of the reason why it didn't play well is it had so many turnovers. This is a team that has that capability. They're overall about a 40th ranked defense, which is very similar to Alabama. So on paper, their defense is not elite, but they are elite at that stat, right? They are 5th in the country at steals. Now, they are not great at committing turnovers or at forcing turnovers, which are not steals, right? They're not great at playing just somewhat straight up defense, right? It's a lot of gambles that either ends in a steal or sometimes mainly end in a more wide open shot, right? Again, it's kind of a little bit of a boom or bust system. But again, they're 5th in the country, so it clearly has a little bit more boom than bust this season. Another thing that I think that Missouri does fairly well is they shoot the ball, right? They're 40th in the country in three-point rate. This is a team that can shoot a decent number of threes. They do like to play fairly fast, so this is a game I would expect that Alabama and Missouri both try to push the pace a little bit. As has been mentioned ad nauseum, this game will be over 70 possessions. Alabama doesn't really play a game in the under 70 possession range. The only one we've played this, here recently has been Purdue, and that was back in November. I believe, and so this is just Alabama does not play games in the under 70 possession range, and against a team like Missouri that has a little bit of a tendency to try to go fast, Alabama's just going to keep up in that tempo, right? You're going to go a little fast, we're going to go even faster, and a lot of that is not having people get defensive set, being able to play in transition. And so for Alabama, it's going to be playing within ourselves, right? It's going to be making sure you are playing how you need to play and playing your game and not letting the opposing defense impact what you're trying to do, right? So for Alabama, I do think this game comes down to get back to what you've done well and learn from some of what went poorly in the Auburn game, but also learn from what went well in the Auburn game. Again, I thought the rebounding in the Auburn game was incredibly good. I thought that the lack of turnovers in the Auburn game was incredibly good. And both of those, I think, will be really important for this Missouri game. Missouri is 253rd at defensive rebounds. They are not a great defensive rebounding team. This is a spot where Alabama, just went up against an Auburn team that wasn't great at defensive rebounds. And Alabama actually was able to take some advantage of that and get some extra offensive possessions. Now, due to our poor shooting, we weren't able to take as much advantage you would expect. But the more opportunities you get, the better, right? So this is a game where Cliff and Grant and Mo Diabate, I think, will all be very big in going at the offensive glass, trying to go back up with the ball. I think that all of those will be very, very big in this game. Again, the free throw and foul thing, that will have to be looked at in this game. Let's see how the refs are calling it. This is one that I think early on you want to play a little conservative, just in case the refs are a little whistle happy, because that Missouri is going to try to draw them later on in the game, as and throughout the game as well. You don't want to have one of your key players be out for the entire first half due to getting a quick 2 fouls. So this is something that you want to pay attention to. The other thing that I will say is when you're looking at Missouri, there's some things that Alabama should be able to have success with. Missouri does an okay job at running teams off the three-point line and an okay job at limiting assists, nowhere near at the level that Auburn did. So I do think that Alabama should be able to get some assists, to get some three-point shots off at a better rate than they did against Auburn. I think that Alabama should also, again, I just mentioned, be able to rebound. I think that Alabama should be able to, be able potentially to block some shots. Missouri is near bottom 300 at getting their shots blocked. Missouri also does not block a lot of shots. That was a place where Alabama in general has not been great this season. We do get a decent number of shots blocked, and that played more into Auburn's skill set with Janai Broome. Janai Broome, kind of sits there around the rim and, has a field day at times blocking shots, especially if you're not, aggressive with the ball. And again, Missouri just does not do that. So in general, if you're to have me paint this in a simple picture, I honestly don't think Missouri matches up super well with Alabama. I think some of the things that Missouri does well are things that, as long as Alabama does not turn over the basketball, right? That's the big thing. Missouri is great at steals. But if you disclude that, right, let's say Alabama learned something, for argument's sake, let's say Alabama learned something in that Auburn game and has learned something kind of throughout this season about what the turnover issue has been, right? You have 12 or less turnovers in this Missouri game. I honestly don't think Missouri matches up well enough to beat Alabama. And I think it's because, again, the things that Missouri is poor at, Alabama does a good job taking advantage of. Inability to block shots. Alabama is great at getting to the rim and finishing. Inability to rebound on the defensive end. Alabama can be at times a great defensive or offensive rebounding team. They do an okay job running you off the three-point line, but I don't think it's going to be well enough to stop an Alabama team that's out to prove something after a poor shooting night against Auburn. They like to run in tempo. Obviously, Alabama is one of the best in the country at that. Right, so I do think that overall, I think Alabama matches up very well with this Missouri team. I do also think, for whatever reason, the fact that Alabama has played very well on the road this season also matches up very well. So I am going to pick Alabama to win this game. I think it's a bounce back spot. I think that we match up very well. I think that Alabama definitely has the capability of playing their game and getting to the shots they want to get to. So like I said, I do think that Alabama wins this game. I'm going to go with an Alabama win by a score of 89-82. Like I said, I do think that Missouri has a solid offense. They've got some guys that have been in this league for a while. A guy like Tamar Bates or Mark Mitchell. Caleb Grill, is a guy who hasn't been in this league a ton, but has played a lot of college basketball, right? They've got some guys that have played a ton of college basketball, and, that does well, especially when you're going down the stretch against a team that's really good like Alabama. But I do think that Alabama will be able to take advantage of certain things that Missouri maybe doesn't do as well. So as I mentioned, I'm going to pick Alabama, and that is by a score of 89-82. As always, if you are interested in the threads that I write that break down, each player and talk about this game in a little bit more player-specific and stat-specific detail, I'm going to be putting that out over on Twitter. That's going to come out the morning of the basketball game, as always. If you are interested in those, follow me over on Twitter. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I know a huge percentage of the people that watch these are not subscribed to the channel, so if you could do that, I would appreciate it. If there's any information that you wish that I included or wish that I added on these, please throw them down in the comments. I do read all the comments. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I do appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.